Are we visible? Welcome back. Thank you for watching our video, for sharing this afternoon with us. I would like to say that this panel is going to be with the 3 faculty members who were involved in the project, myself, Sophie Rachmu, and Noreen Francois, who you can see on the screen, and 4 of the students that were involved in the project. They'll introduce themselves. So we have 2 students here from Montclair State, Daniel Marks and Escané Saint-Fort. 2 students from UBM, Odile Cazeneuve and Julie Mariage. So first, I will ask each of you to just give a brief self-introduction. Just tell us about yourself. We just met you on screen, but maybe people don't remember you specifically from the video. So Escané.
I am Escané Saint-Fort. 30 years old. I'm majoring in linguistics and also I'm minoring in French translation. So it's been a pleasure working on this project and really enjoying the process so far.
Oh, and I'd like to thank Escané for doing the narration of the introduction to the MSU introduction. Daniel?
I'm Daniel. During the video, I was a junior, now I'm a senior. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, this was a very fun, interesting project, and I'm really glad to see how it all came together. So.
Okay, I don't know who wants to go first, Julie or Odile.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, yeah, great. So hi, I'm Julie. I'm 21. I'm also in modern and applied languages. I'm currently in the US in the state of Oklahoma. And yeah, I keep studying and I'm doing my last year of university. So consider as a senior here.
Thank you. You might notice that Julie's name is not on our program. One of the panelists had an emergency and Julie stepped in at the very last minute. So merci beaucoup, Julie from Oklahoma. And Odile, vous êtes là?
Yes, I already spoke. I guess you didn't hear me.
No, we didn't.
Okay, so yeah, I said I was sorry because I couldn't put my camera on, and so I'm Odile. I'm 22. I'm from Bordeaux, and I'm studying modern applied languages with English and Chinese.
Thank you. So we'll go around the 4 students and ask you just some questions about what sorts of what you gained from the project, right? So first, maybe we'll ask the French students what you gained from the project in terms of your language level, your language skills, and translation skills.
I guess first about language skills, it did help in English, of course, because I had an American student that could really help me when I was looking for some words or thinking about how to build a sentence. Like I was with Tahib, he could directly help me to think about which was the better way to address an American public. But I also actually improved in French too, because when I had to explain to Tahib which what he didn't understand about some French sentences, I had to really think about what the author meant and to really think about French constructions of sentences to really make sure I was explaining him right.
Yes. Really?
Yeah, so translation was translating was really good. So I've learned of course lots of new vocabulary, and as Odile says, sometimes it's not easy to translate, especially some French expression that we used to hear, and we're just trying to focus on how can we translate that. So yeah, that was not always the easiest thing to do. But I've learned that when you translate, you have to be aware of your audience and also make sure you of the context. So, because like some words are similar in French and English, but they don't have the same signification. Like, and so that's, you have to be aware of that. And so, yeah, that's collaborating with people really helps to have another point of view on the thing and being more open-minded when you want to translate something.
Stephanie and Daniel, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that really have a language learner is the level of exposure to the language, and especially for me, since like I've moved in America like 4 years ago, to get acclimated with the language, weather, everything. So it's pretty intense, but I enjoyed the process, especially whenever I have the occasion of like meet up with people. So it's a learning process for me. And this experience particularly, I had a good level of exposure where like we have several casual situations where I could express myself and I could learn new nuances and some other things that I would never be able to in a formal setting, but that project gave me the opportunity to learn so much more.
Yeah, I echo what everyone has said. You know, the first translation class was asynchronous, mostly I'm assuming due to the pandemic. So there was limited collaboration. There was some, but this was really rooted in collaboration, especially with someone from a French-speaking country. So there's just certain like nuances to the French language that I did not understand, that I still don't fully understand. But Raphael, my partner, was very quick to say, well, we would say this in this context. And I was very quick to do the same for him. So yeah, I really appreciated the collaborative aspect of this.
I don't know if Rolene or Sophie wants to add anything, but the one thing that I'm really thinking about here in terms of language was how much time we spent on the difference between La République and Republican. Okay, La République Française, right, has nothing to do with the Republican Party, right? And so if we were trying to translate something that was talking about les valeurs républicaines, right, the values of the French Republic, we couldn't translate that as Republican values, right? Okay, so trying to find different ways to say things like that, where the word looks, you know, pretty transparent that it means what it means, and yet it doesn't. Rolene or Sophie?
Yeah, what was very interesting is how much of the different cultures was important. It was important to know about these the different cultures and the talk that they had about the different, what we call civilization, but the different cultures, the French culture from the inside and the American culture from the inside, and the dialogue that they had together, and the fact that they realized that there was very different meanings behind these different words that seem similar. And I think they became aware of that. And in a live situation, it's I think that was the fun part of it, is to translate as an experience, as an oral experience. It's partly oral because you are discussing, and so it becomes an experience, not just you and the paper and the books and the dictionaries, for example. So it becomes embodied by their, and some of them have stayed friends, have become friends, real friends. So yeah, it was, I think, a success all around in terms of translation and in human terms as well.
Yes, and if I may add just a few words, as I said in the video, Sophie and I actually come from a group of translation where we translate all together, collaboratively, some poetry. And in those sessions, we have those very lively conversations, discussions over how to translate things, and we have a lot of fun. And from what the students just said right now, I'm glad that they had a bit of that experience as well, exchanging with people. And I mean, that's exactly what translation is about. It's about conveying something to another audience, making things accessible to somebody else. And that became, something very lively indeed. So I'm glad they had, the gist of it, and that they could enjoy it themselves as much as we do when we have this workshop with colleagues over poetry.
I believe Dr. Pelton has told us we have a question from YouTube.
We do. We have a question from someone who's watching on YouTube. I believe the name is Marcel Simon. And the question is for the students of both countries. Did you find that the slang words and expressions posed a special challenge? How did you approach translation of slang phrases?
Well, I don't recall there being too much slang, just because we were translating more formal documents, textbooks, things like that.
Newspaper articles,
Newspaper
not the whole
articles.
speech. He wasn't using a lot of slang.
Right, but I as a French student, I've had to deal with that, and it's tricky.
It seems to me that connected to slang, we had this issue of having to translate things that were, oral, that were supposed to be speeches and oral language. And I think they had some difficulty dealing with that, oral aspect of the language, because sometimes when we speak, we start a sentence in a certain way, and then we continue it in a different way, because in the middle of the sentence, we've decided that we were going to add something to our thought. And so in the speech that we translated from by Macron, they were confronted with that issue of having to translate sentences that sometimes were not so syntactically correct as we might have expected. And well, the choice you have in translation is to come back to something more, more regular. I don't know how to say that. Something that sounds, more syntactically correct. You have sort of to correct the original speaker, so to say. But that is a difficult choice to make. And that is hard to handle, especially in terms of understanding already, first of all, and then rendering the sentence properly. Yeah, I guess that's the closest.
I think that when Dr. Tachon was giving her workshop about how, actually the workshop was about how do you name in sociolinguistics, which she is a specialist of. She asked the students and us, everyone participating, how do you call someone a person of color? How do you, so everyone said different things. And then we watched a video where Black people from the inside said how they felt, for example, that in French to be called, not to be called Black was, they preferred it to be straightforward and be called Black, for example. But in French, we said many people use the word Black, which is the
English word
English
Black.
word.
We talk about a Black person, right? Black.
Yes, and this is slang. This is slang in a way, and it's actually very difficult to translate. I remember that the American students were really surprised that we would use the word in English Black to talk euphemistically, to talk about the color without talking about it and being uneasy. To talk about our unease, we would use the English term. So that was quite interesting. And I think that that's what slang is about too. And it's extremely difficult to translate, actually. To translate an English term used in French, because we say black, okay? We say it in the French way, which probably Americans wouldn't even recognize. But okay, that was one interesting thing.
Yeah, and just to add on what Professor was talking about, like we had that experience many times. Because in translation, so one of the things that is argued about is to keep the authenticity of the text you're translating. So as a translator, you cannot let your feeling influence the translation. So we had to deal with that. And my counterpart, like my partner in France, most of the time, I would tell her that, okay, this is how we say it here. And she's like, this is not something we would, the equivalent, this is not something we would feel comfortable saying. I'm like, well, okay, so we're just doing our job. So, yeah, so.
I think we encountered a little bit of this problem when we were working with the museum catalog from the Musée d'Aquitaine, because they used words like neg, right?
Yeah.
Using the historical term that was used in the 17th or 18th century. And so then we had many interesting discussions with Dr. Edwards about, well, how did this was the word that was used at the time. How did she translate it into English for a 21st century audience, right? And so that was a really interesting discussion. And, just this evolution of the words used to refer to people of color in both countries, the cultural reasons that these words have changed. So the next area of questioning we wanted to talk about was what you learned in a cultural sense, right? In sort of this, what Dr. Kingstone was talking about before, the cultural comparison between France and the United States or your country of origin. We had many students from Haiti or Dominican Republic or our partners over in France, Julie and Odile.
Well, I guess we've mentioned it before, but the issues around multiculturalism and laicism, like laicité, like there was really, you can see that American people and French people really don't see this the same way, because in France you would never think about saying, yeah, there's 3% Black people, 3% Asian people. That's not something we would even think about. And in America, it's totally normal.
Even our use of the word race was controversial for the French counterparts, right? That the word race either refers to a human race or nothing at all. There's no such thing as different races. And so they would talk more about ethnic origin, right?
Yeah, and also something that we learned is that although in France they don't really classify based on race, there is still racial disparity in France. So it sparks a conversation about, is that the right way to go? Because there's still disparity and it seems like it's being ignored. Whereas in our own country, of course there are people who ignore it, but it's so prevalent that it becomes harder to ignore. So it's tricky, and it's a cultural thing, but that's a big difference that I noticed.
Judy?
Yeah, so what was like really interesting also to see about that, it's like, so like racism is like Black Lives Matter movement is like really imposing, like it's really important, like in the US, like it's a big thing. And in France, so has like most people, you guys says, like it's not that much of a big deal. I mean, it's like there is racism, but we don't see it. And so that's why like kind of like talk to me kind of, because like we kind of like just not ignoring that there is racism in France, but it's just like, oh yeah, well, it's just like we don't talk about it, so we will assume probably there is, but it's stronger than what we can think. It's just like, because there's like also a strong majority of like white people as well. And so when you're like surrounded by this kind of like majority, you like you don't really think about just like that. And this is a conversation I also had like with one of my roommate, which is like she's also from like a Afro-American background here. And so that was really interesting to see also how people interact with the fact that, oh yeah, so it's like if you're not confronted to that, you can't really think about it. But when it's about you, it's something that affects you. I don't know if that makes sense, but so that was really relevant, and that makes me like really think a little bit more about just racism in general, and just be like, oh, this is something I can't really neglect it, because it actually is a thing and this is happening. So yeah.
Any other reaction?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I was amazed about also is when we had to address the concept of laicity.
La laïcité, the secularism, the separation of church and state, but there's no one word to say this in.
That particular caused a challenge, and also in the way we perceive the concept as well here in America. I would view it more like a mean of expression. There is no conformity. You're free to express who you are and represent who you are without being judged. But from the French perspective, we could have seen like laïcité from my French partner, as she explained to me, was more seen like there's a particular way to express yourself when you're in public. So like everybody so it's hard for people to see the difference. Like yeah, we had discussions about that, and that was very interesting to me.
So that came up around questions around the veil, right? How the wearing of the Muslim veil is the attitudes toward that are so different in the United States and in France, whereas in the United States we would never. You have, as Skyne was saying, you have the freedom to express yourself publicly, to express what your religion is publicly, wearing visible signs of your religion, whereas this is not allowed in a French context in public spaces. And how that has to do with this French national character that Macron was fearing in his speech, that was being sort of invaded, by these ideas of, is diversity, is our focus on diversity separating us, right? And so I think that was the fear that he was expressing, that the unity of the French people would be harmed by this focus on diversity.
Yes, because I think that community is thought of as ghetto in France. Community in the United States, something really positive, because it's the link between people, the bonding, etc. But in France, communautarisme, what we call communautarisme, and we're afraid of, is linked with ghetto, something that's
Ghettoization.
Yeah, segregation.
Ghettoization, separatism, right? So we wouldn't translate communitarism by community, but by sort of actually the opposite of that, right? The separating out into distinct communities instead of one population.
And it's the same thing with race. Yeah, excuse me.
No, it's okay. Dean Kingston had a question.
I was curious, Julie's comment suggested that the exchange led you to think a little bit differently about your own home, your own context. I was wondering if the other students on the panel or other students in the class felt like this opportunity, not just a matter of translating and understanding the other society, but did it lead you in any way to think differently about your own local society or community? Or
well, not really, because I have friends and family who have faced this kind of racism. Like, for example, I have the brother of my aunt who is Black, and he works in banks, and if he's driving with his suit on, he would never get arrested by the police. But on weekends, if he has a sweatshirt, he would often get arrested. So it's something I already knew about, like how it's more discreet than in America, because we're not openly racist in France. It's more like a underlying kind of racism.
Well, for me, something that I really had to reconcile with, it's something that I still think about after this class has ended, is that this information, this teaching of the history, this was the first time that I ever learned about the history of slavery in New Jersey, history of slavery in France, and I just came to the conclusion that this information was probably purposely withheld from me. I mean, we see today there's people, parents are pulling their kids out of history class. They don't want their kids to learn the history of this nation as it really happened. And I think I've, fallen victim to that, as we all probably have. So I've had to deal with, I had asked myself, why is it that as a sophomore or junior in college in a French class that I'm learning about the history of slavery in New Jersey and not in a middle school history class? Yeah.
I think that's crucial. I learned things from Dr. Hemsler at our visit at the Historical Society about, I didn't grow up in New Jersey, but I grew up in a northern state, the state of New York, and I learned so much about the involvement of the way we are taught as people from the north is, oh, that was something that was in the South. We had nothing to do with that. We were the good guys, right? And we learned so much about the involvement of the North, but then also how the northern states, New Jersey in particular, the New Jersey Historical Society, Dr. Hemsler describes Newark as the factory for the South. You want to speak about that?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of the these ships, materials in terms of equipment that they needed, they come from northern parts of Europe. And
and they were manufactured in Newark, the physical implements that were needed to maintain slavery in the South.
Yeah, just the ropes and sandals and stuff that can be used for the slaves at the moment. They were manufactured in New Jersey.
That was really mind blowing for me personally. I think for the students as well. So yeah, we are taught in France, sometimes they think, well, slavery is an American thing. We had nothing to do with it, and they learned their own involvement. And then in the North, in the United States, we think of it as a Southern thing. So we learned how much we were all implicated during this time period.
Now, I guess there's also the necessity for a state to keep a sort of narrative, a narrative that is told that gives a good impression of who you are, and that enables also a group of people to become a society. So, I mean, this denial of what really happened might be due to this desire to create a story that will unite people and not show the bad aspects of our past. But and that goes back to what Julie said and to what some of you said, because we don't want to speak about some aspects of our past, some aspects of what is going on in our society, we end up ignoring issues that need to be dealt with. And so, the naming or not naming of phenomena, the naming or not naming of racial the institutionalized racism, that is I think something that that prevents us from managing to deal with our own past, and that is understandable when you think of the need to once again create a common narrative. But I think that this common narrative is fraught with hypocrisy when you do so. And that's why I guess it was very important for us to speak about those matters, because then some of our students came to realize that, yes, there are things going on that cannot always be seen, but they are there, whether in the past or in the present. So, yeah.
Are there any questions from
We
YouTube?
have many
Many questions from YouTube, okay.
Good questions. I almost don't know where to start. Montclair State Sociology Department writes, thank you so much for your participation. I see so much promise in this approach. Given the different treatments of race, racism, and slavery in each country, did you find any difficulty to discuss these themes? How did you navigate discussions and translations of these items? I'm sorry, of these themes.
Well, I'll just say, I may be repeating myself from earlier, but very often we would translate the English word race by ethnic origin in French, right? So there again is this, and on the one hand, it's a positive spin that we're all one human race. But on the other hand, it is a way perhaps of denying the existence of institutional racism and the differences and the discrepancies that do exist that Daniel was pointing out. So to translate the word race by ethnic origin doesn't feel the same to me. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but or any other difficulties that you wanted to.
I mean, for me, like, and that's one of the things I had to learn as well. So for the person that I am, I like to tell the truth just the way as it is. And I think that's one of the things that helped me a lot along the process. But at the same time, I was trying to put myself in my friend's shoes, trying to see, okay, like, how would they feel? What if I adjust a little bit? But like I felt in the dilemma. But at the end of the day, I said, okay, that's my job as a translator. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. If I have an opportunity to discuss the context, I will. But as a translator, my job is not to like how and I had to choose like which audience, because we were like a mixed audiences. We had to translate both like for us and our French partners as well. So we're trying to navigate through this dilemma, but most of the time I would get the feeling of not being too sentimental when it would be more.
We had some interesting discussions also just about the fact that the phrase, the name of the movement, Black Lives Matter, is not translated in France, right? So why is it called? Is that another distancing move, right? To not translate the name of the movement into French. Does it make it feel like an American import? Does it make it seem like something that they're not connected to? Or is it giving a nod to the American origins of this international movement?
And perhaps that's something that is being spearheaded on a government level, but you know, the French, they know how to protest. So and when things happen in our country, they show up for us in their country. And you know, I was at Rutgers when I went to their museum and I learned about Angela Davis, that in France there was a huge effort to liberate Angela Davis. So, you know, the people, I think, and perhaps the messaging from the government are two different things.
Any questions?
Oh, yes. Steve Ferreira asks, what changes in their societies, if any, do the students think must happen as a result of this cultural and linguistic exchange? What changes in your societies, if any, do you think must happen as a result of this cultural and linguistic exchange?
Vous avez compris la question, Julie et Odile?
Yeah. Well, I guess it would be really good to promote this kind of exchange, because when you learn about others people culture, about how they think, and you really exchange with them, with not just like watch a documentary or something, really talk with someone that is native from the other country, it really helps people open their minds and question themselves and how they react to the world and how they want to leave it, really.
Yeah, I feel like that was very like I wouldn't say entertaining, but like captivant, you know, because like it's just the way like we have been interact with people, and as Odile says, like of course like it's like helping really to have a different point of view on the situation and open your mind. And it's also like a good way to exchange like with people about like what you think, but at the same time like you cannot really go to the end of your thought, because it's like this is a very sensitive topics, and like people are very sensitive and you don't want to hurt people, so you have to be really careful about what you says. But I think that will be like giving people a great opportunity to express more about their feeling, their perception about like these kind of topic, or kind of like no one wants really to talk about it because it's kind of taboo, and it's just like, oh well, we've talked about that, we learned through history, but this belongs to the past. But no, it does not, because it's still like going on today. So I think that will be really giving a great opportunity to people to just like express themselves without putting a judgment on what they think, even if it's still very complicated topics, and like you have to really be careful and use the right words to just express what you think about it.
Is there anything you feel like should change about French society that you've discovered through the course of this project?
I would say like French people should be more open-minded for sure, even if we like in a cultural country, because we have like lots of, as you would say, like races, like lots of different people from different country coming to France. French people are still like kind of like not that open-minded, I would say. And I wouldn't say we're like in a white community, but it's still like kind of still, you know, it's like, well, we still have like lots of people from Arabic countries, Africa countries, but I think like the white people are still like a strong, like it's really dominant. And so depends where you are in France, like just like in the US. But yeah, I think people need to be more aware and more open-minded. And I'm saying that because like I used to like make some jokes sometime, or like to use some words. And so this class, and just like in my personal reflection in general, like really helped me to just like think about that, and just like being, oh yeah, okay, this can affect people, this is not very nice, and I should just be aware of that it can really go deep, and people are really sensitive about that. So even like though a little joke really can hurt someone, so I think people should be more aware. And it's not because you are French and that you laugh about your country first that you can laugh about all the other country. You can be sarcastic, you can just have like sometime make a little joke, but you have to be careful not to push it too far. And so that's why like I've kind of like learned about that, and I was like, okay, maybe I should really be like aware about what I'm going to say, or just not using this word anymore, because there's no reason for me to say, and oh, my friend is, let's say I have a black friend. Well, why should I say I have a black friend? I don't call my friend, oh, this is my white friend. I just say, oh, my friend from this part of the world, or my friend from Africa, or my friend from this place. So, you know, because like, according to people, you don't want to hurt them, and people have a different approach about the topic. So, yeah.
Thank you, Julie.
I think these questions are sort of went together, so I'll ask them together and then you guys can decide how you want to answer them. Same person though, Marcel Simon. To what extent is this difficulty with laïcité and communitarism, excuse me, mesh with the precedence Americans give to individual expression? And in the same context, does French have the concept of code switching, and how does that work?
Well, Dr. Tanchon can talk about code switching for us. If she were here on the panel, our sociolinguistic expert. Do Sophie or Doreen, do either of you want to speak about code switching in French? Is there?
Well, I couldn't hear the whole question that AJ just gave us. Could you repeat, Kate? Because I tend to hear your voice better.
Okay. Oh, so la laïcité et le communautarisme, does that so the question says, how does it enmesh with the precedence that Americans give to individual expression? Right, so I think it's getting at the United States is a more individualistic society as opposed to France being a more collectivist society.
I think it's also in schools, like for example, from primary school to high school in France, people are not allowed to wear obvious religious signs. That means no veil for Muslim, for example. And there are a lot of debates in France every summer around the burkini and other religious items like this. And these are debates, like for example, in an American school, if a Muslim student is allowed to wear the veil, and it's no question about there is a question about if you're French, you're not supposed to wear the veil because every French people is just French. Like we don't have religion.
Yes.
Religion is supposed to be a private thing. Like we keep it at home for French people. Like
you're supposed to be French first,
yes.
and then you can be something else. And that's what you said, Kate, about the collectivist aspect prevailing over individual freedom or individual expression. And I guess that this is what Odile was describing. In fact, yeah, that's all those social issues that come time and again in the French debate over whether you're supposed to be allowed to wear a veil at work, things like that. They come from the fact that indeed we don't give priority to individual freedom. We give priority to a social cohesion. And of course, when you stand, from a different vantage point, and which is, for instance, the American vantage point, which is about giving priority to the individual, then, that doesn't make sense, of course. Because the priority is not the same. So it's all a question of vantage point, what prevails over what, and that very much relates. I guess that answers the question about laïcité as well. Okay, laïcité being the rule of the state prevailing over your personal expression of faith, of religion, of anything else. Mm-hmm.
I think that's very well put. Do we have any questions from our present audience? Jenny in the back.
So in elementary school, we were always told to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And some of us, we were kids, so some of us didn't really know what it meant. and we would just like say it automatically. But I think recently some people are allowed to sit out of saying the pledge if they don't want to. So I'm kind of curious if like France has like that kind of nationalism or like support if they have like a pledge of allegiance, kind of like the US, and like if you wanted to sit out, would you be like punished for it?
Well, not really. We don't really have that kind of stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure most French people don't even know the national anthem. At least not all the words of it. And we don't. I know that in America there is this big thing around the flag. Like you're supposed to fold it in a certain way. And in France, like you don't throw an American flag on the ground. It's really rude in America. In France, people don't really care about these symbols.
They do care about the Marseillaise though, because we've seen in soccer matches, games, we've seen, for example, football players do a sign that was misinterpreted. I mean, and at one point I remember when there were players whose mouths were not saying the French anthem. That became a problem. So
Problematic. But there's no such thing as a pledge of allegiance. You don't make the students
No.
stand up, the eight-year-olds stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag in France. That's not something that happens.
No.
Not at
but-
all. And
certainly not with God in it.
Certainly not something with God in it, yes.
Because I went to intermediate school in Houston, Texas, and I had to recite the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, and it was really strange for me as a French person. I can tell you that it was
But-
a whole other culture.
But the
Yeah.
question that Jenny asked was, I think it was Jenny who asked it, is extremely interesting because I had never thought about it. But yes, on the one hand, as we just said previously, in France, the collectivist aspect seems to be the priority over the individual, and yet it's quite paradoxical to think that in schools, we don't have that type of meeting in the morning. We don't have that honoring of the flag. That is rather paradoxical, and I had never thought about it. So thank you very much, Jenny. But I'm not sure I have a question, an answer to your question. But that is rather strange and surprising in a way.
But it used to be probably that we had to recite Catholic prayer, because we were a Catholic country for a very long time, where the Catholicism was really important. So for a long time we had that, but laïcité was built against that. So
yes, but precisely.
This is the history, and both our histories are very different.
But precisely when the state wanted to get rid of, the church in the schools, in public places, it might have been a good way of erasing the presence of the church by replacing those Catholic songs by something more related to the state, but it didn't happen. So I'm not sure why. That's a really good idea. It's a really good question.
Very good question. We have another question in person here from Mr. Tedamasi.
Yes. Actually, it's just some information for Lorraine. She had mentioned poetry in two of her comments today, and she may not realize that New Jersey hosts one of the largest poetry festivals in the world every 2 years here in New Jersey, and it's called the Dodge Poetry Festival, and it attracts people from all over the world, including France. And I'm going to pay attention to the translation of the poetry from now on to see if I can get the experience of the meaning.
Well, thank you very much for this information. That's an extra reason to to come and visit.
You could also probably going to be able to view it online. It's the next one is it's every 2 years, so the next one is October of 2022, and if you just and it's like 3 or 4 days, and you can in Newark, New Jersey, and when you get online, you just have to Google Dodge Poetry Festival.
Well, thanks a lot. That sounds wonderful. Yes, thanks.
Students, have any of you kept in touch with your partners or any of the other students in the class?
Oh yeah, definitely. I happened to keep contact with Lucy and Julie as well, so we spoke like a couple of minutes, a couple hours before. So yeah.
That's great. How about you, Daniel?
Well, Raphael and myself, we haven't kept in touch too much, but we're still both in this group, like a Facebook group, and people are still active in it. So there's still communication.
There's still communication. Yeah. How about for Judy and Odile? Are you keeping in touch with?
Not really, no.
Maybe during the class.
I'm still on the group chat, obviously, but I didn't really keep contact with my partner.
Well, Adnan was here previously, and he says that Leo has invited him to visit him in Paris. So he'll be going to visit Leo in Paris, and he wants to go to Versailles. He was asking me today how much it costs to get into the Palace of Versailles.
Well, for my part, I kept in touch with Viscani and also with Steven, who was like my partner. Yeah, I didn't keep in touch with like others because I didn't really get the chance to know them better. And the French people, well, these were just my peers, and well, yeah, you don't get along with everyone, but I'm willing to talk with anyone if one day anyone pop up, and just start a conversation. I would love to go to New Jersey while I'm here in Oklahoma, but maybe next semester. I've talked with like Steven and Viscani about that, and I have also a friend in Rochester, so if I have the opportunity, I'd love to go.
That's where I'm from, is Rochester. You can come stay with my family in Rochester. And you're welcome also here in New Jersey. Any final comments or questions from either side? Well, I'd like to thank you all so much for coming. I can't wait to the day that I can share a glass of Bordeaux with Noreen and Sophie to cheer ourselves on this year of work, and I just want to thank everyone again for all the work that's gone into this project and everyone's enthusiasm and expertise, and just thank you all for being here today. And
I wanted to can I just add something that we hope that we're going to continue this year. So on that note, it would be nice. We're going to do something. We're going to carry it on and maybe do it a little bit differently this year. And it will be very interesting to continue with new students, I think.
Yeah, we have a whole new cohort of students on both sides that are going to do this in the spring semester. So we'll choose a new topic and a new topic for the purposes of cultural comparison and see where that takes us.
Yes. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you, Kate.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Face, and
thank you, AJ and Jenny. Really,
yes.
And Montclair State University. Yeah, we hope to be able to visit one day, and that you come and visit too.
We will.
And we were so grateful to Jenny for all the hours that she put in this video. That was, it was probably a real nightmare because you had bits and pieces in French that you could not really understand, and you had to make something out of it. Having a bilingual video like that and dealing with people on the other side of the Atlantic who were not available at the same hours as you were. All my congratulations for, having faced that huge challenge and having come up with something great as you did. And I do hope you catch up on your sleep.
Yes, AJ has tabulated just the number of hours that the tech team spent on this, and it's in the many hundreds.
Yeah, in the
So
hundreds.
thank you.
Thank you.
Plus the time that the faculty spent preparing and meeting and teaching, and the students, the time that you spent on the project. So this was a labor of love. So thank you.
And I hope that the FACE Foundation is happy with the results.
We hope so too. Merci. Merci.